Welcome guys! I've said it before, being good at spotting enemies is the single most important skill to have in PUBG. The reasons are obvious. Spotting your enemies before they spot you allow you to move in open areas with low risk, allow you to take the first shot in a gunfight, or let you decide if it's better to avoid confrontation when executing stealth tactics. The art of spotting enemies lies mainly in the way you use your eyes, where you focus and how you scan your surroundings. I illustrated this manually in my old spotting video, but now thanks to my sponsor Tobii Gaming, I am able to show you this using Tobii eye tracking technology. What you will see here is as real as it gets, as I have been able to record exactly where I look during gameplay. The content of this video is scan types, focus resource management, and detecting movement. The first scan type is the horizontal scan. The horizontal scan is by far the most important way to spot enemies when running in the open. My most frequently used strategy is to stay completely away from vehicles and instead simply move out directly in the open. The reason I feel comfortable doing this is because of the effectiveness of horizontal scanning. Horizontal scanning is a method you want to use when you want to be able to consume as much visual information at the fastest possible rate, which is also super useful when holding a position or trying to identify the location of an enemy while looking in the direction you just heard him fire a shot in. Horizontal scanning should be used when an enemy would naturally stand out in relation to his surroundings by contrast alone. Using the Tobii Eye Tracker 4C, I was able to record this heat map of my focus, which is really cool because you can clearly see in which areas of the screen I look the most. Take a moment to study this recording. Okay, there's a few important things I'd like to point out from this heat mapping. The first thing is that I'm not constantly using horizontal scan, but instead shifting in and out of it. You can clearly see my main focus is in the center of the screen, but when moving my camera I also change the direction in which I'm looking, thereby still using horizontal scanning, but instead of shifting focus I'm moving the camera. The other thing is that when spotting the enemy, I almost completely cease to use the horizontal scan, as I require all focus on him while sneaking up. The second I've killed him, I am at an increased risk of being attacked, as I have now just made noise, which is why I instantly shift back to the horizontal scanning movements. Running in the open requires a lot of horizontal scanning in order for you to be safe. This footage is an example of exactly that. Notice how I often reach the outer edge of my field of view. This is not something that feels natural to do and can feel like an extra strain on your eyes. Often I prefer to simply move my camera instead of putting my eyes on this exhausting task. But this is horizontal scanning in its purest form. Next is the focus scan. Focus scanning is rapidly changing focus on specific objects. This is something you need to do when a player won't immediately stand out based on contrast alone. A typical use of this scan is when scanning windows of buildings, or when exiting a city at foot. and also when running in areas densely populated by trees, bushes and other objects. Constantly shift focus between suspicious contrast or places where an enemy might suddenly appear, and you might end up seeing something. Finally, we have the priority focus scan. This is the scan you use when you have your predatory eyes locked on your prey. You only use this scan in a combat situation, because if you use this scan in another situation, it's basically a waste of focus. It's comfortable and relaxing to just focus on one thing, and you do need rest sometimes. But be careful, because using the priority focus scan too long or too often is also known as tunnel visioning. Focus resource management. You should think of your focus as a resource you can spend as you wish. If you focus on unnecessary things too much, such as looking too long in your inventory, looking too much in a specific direction, or perhaps you tunnel vision an enemy for too long, well, that's waste of focus. So how do we spend our focus optimally? The trick is to limit the need for focus in certain directions. A great example of this is when running with the blue zone. The blue zone requires minimum focus, as it is unlikely that anyone will be out there. It's all about limiting your open angles. This is something I do a lot when moving around. I constantly evaluate the terrain and prioritize going where I can be covered by a hill, an object, or even some trees or bushes. If you only have to look in one or two directions, it's much easier to spot enemies, as you will be able to prioritize full focus on scanning in that direction. An example of this situation is right here. Because my enemies are unable to see me or attack me from my right side, I can spend my full focus on spotting for enemies in the other directions instead. Risk assessment of angles. If you can't get your angles covered, you should evaluate each angle and focus in a direction where you think it's most probable that an enemy might suddenly appear. Typically, this is either to your left or right side, but it really depends on the situation. The message here is to carefully spend your precious focus, as it is key in being able to spot enemies before they spot you. Detecting movement. Movement is by far the easiest to detect, as it does not require you to directly focus on a player in order to spot the movement. The eye will detect movement in the periphery of your focus, making the horizontal scan the most optimal scan for detecting enemy movement if it occurs within your scan area. But there is something else you can do to drastically increase your sensitivity of detecting enemy player movement, and you may not like it. Because I've said this many times, and I will say it over and over again, having anti-aliasing on ultra or high will reduce pixel movement, as edges are softened, thereby filtering out a lot of false movement. Anti-aliasing on high or ultra is the best setting for spotting enemies, and it is highly competitive as well. The trade-off here is that it costs FPS, and your image will appear slightly blurry. But don't let that fool you, you will still be much better equipped to spot moving enemies than if your anti-aliasing is on a low setting. If you don't believe me, you can just go in-game and walk around a bit with anti-aliasing on very low, and then you do the same thing with anti-aliasing on ultra. You will feel that the image is much calmer, making sudden movement vastly easier to detect. Now that's all I had for you guys in this video. If you would like to analyze your own focus, or perhaps record it on your own videos or display it on a stream, you can use the link and the code in the description below to get free shipping when you purchase your very own Eye Tracker 4C. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you guys next time.